So we got our first question up here. It says, you have said that God hates pain and suffering, but you haven't addressed to the skeptic or suffer why God didn't take away pain and suffering now.
Mm-hmm.
So we talked about that in the video about taking pain and suffering, but why didn't he take it away now? Joe, do you have any thoughts on that?
I think that a lot of times this is a question that comes out of deep experience. As Nathan said, the question of suffering is prompted by the reality of suffering, which is a jagged experience. It's a larger question than a moment can answer, but it often comes out of something that somebody's experiencing in their life or over their life. And so I don't know you, but I want to let you know my heart reaches out to you, and I can understand something of the experience of unrelenting suffering in certain dimensions of my life. But I think many times it's an even harder question for a believer. And you may be a believer having asked this question, because it indicates in your question that you feel that God could do something, but he hasn't. And so let me just talk about, from my point of view, the fact that God does all things with purpose. He's not a mindless force. He's not a God who has spun the world and walked away from it. He's intimately involved with the world, and he does everything with a purpose. In fact, the scripture says that God declares, my counsel shall stand. In Ephesians 1:11, it says, I, God, do all things well. So God does everything with a purpose. The scripture also says that he is fully and completely good. So I can't know all the details in my situation as to why God would not take away certain suffering. I can't know what his perfect purposes are, because often he hides his purposes. He says, my ways are not your ways. My thoughts are not your thoughts. But I can know that he has a good plan in all of it. And I know that he uses it to do three things. One is in the life of the non-believer. And I think about coronavirus, and this has really been on my mind a lot, Josh, about what we're all going through as a world society. One of the things God uses suffering for is to communicate the brokenness of our world and our frailty as people, the fact that we don't have ultimate strength, we don't have ultimate answers. And suffering drives us to understand that this is a broken world and to ask the question, what has broken it? And the answer biblically is sin and rebellion has broken it. And so suffering and pain are markers. They're signposts to look to something deeper. And that's why I think a lot of people today in the coronavirus crisis are from the secular mindset looking for spiritual answers, because suffering is doing its job in the modern world. It's causing us to see there's a brokenness in our world, and our human reactions to it are falling so short that there must be an answer to the suffering that we're all going through, and we're starting to look to him. That's what God does in the larger world. But I think if you're a believer, two things are also true about why God has purpose in suffering and why he may not let it cease for you. Perhaps you're suffering from the wrong choices of other people. And that adds a deeper layer to suffering, doesn't it? And that adds the malice of others, and that this might not have had to happen if someone wasn't wicked in my life. The scripture says that God can take the evil of men and use it for good. Think back to the story of Joseph in the Old Testament, a righteous man who suffered for decades because of the evil of his brothers. And at the end of it, he looked at them and said, you meant this for evil, but God meant it for good, to accomplish a good purpose. So one of the reasons we know a good God who always accomplishes his will can be trusted about suffering is he has a good purpose, even if other people have caused it. And then the last thing I'll say is that suffering, no matter where it comes from a phantom source or for something very clear, is something that God always uses in the life of the believer to deepen their relationship with God.
Amen.
And I just think of one person and one name, and that's Job. At the end of the story of Job, that's the greatest discovery he made, this godly man, that through the deepest suffering of his life, he came into the deepest knowledge of God. And I don't think he would have fully traded the one for the other because he saw what God did. So that's a reach at that. It's an important question. Thanks for asking.
It is an important question. It's one we won't be able to fully answer this side of heaven. Everyone's situation is unique, but we know Scripture does teach us that God is working in our lives through the suffering. Hi, I'm Pastor Josh. We want to thank you for watching our video from the Thinking Biblically Conference. We encourage you to click the subscribe button so you can check out some more videos from us, from our conference and from our church. We'd also encourage you to check out our website at valley4th.com. That's valley, the number 4th.com. Thanks for watching.